7:36 in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, we're continuing our weekly conversations with the United Nations, women's organizations in dealing with issues of gender-based violence, women and girls, different issues. And today, it's gender-based violence and migrants will be our focus. Our guests work with the International Organization for Migration, which means they are directly involved with victims of trafficking. And we hope to get a greater sense of some of the challenges faced by migrants, especially now with the re-registration of Venezuelan migrants, and that process is ongoing. Well, we're joined in studio by Gracie Gonzalez, who is the migrant counselor at the IOM, who is a Venezuelan migrant herself, married to a Trinidadian. And also joining us via Zoom, we have the head of the IOM, the head of the office here with responsibility for our region, Joel Ali, is joining us via Zoom as well. Good morning to you both. Thanks very much for joining us. I should say as well that the full name for our guest in studio is Gracie Carolina Gonzalez Laguna, which is why I'm always looking forward to do football commentary, where you could call all the names in a South American football game, because you couldn't complete a single play without 20 minutes going by. But good of you to join us. Before we hear from Joel Ali via Zoom, just give us your perspective when we talk about the issues of migration, with your own experience as a Venezuelan national and your relationship with those who face different challenges with the situation in your home country. What is your perspective this morning?
Yeah, so good morning. Migration is not a vulnerability itself, but the condition of migration is what could put women and men on risk. I will say that some of the risk factors are the separation from family members. There's also a breakdown on the community support. A lot of people come here without knowing what are their rights, without knowing where they could access to services, and some food insecurity and also livelihoods put them on risk of sexual gender-based violence.
And you're a clinical psychologist by profession. Are you able to offer your assistance in your professional capacity to assist people? And what are you hearing from them? What would they like to see, especially women and girls who are seen to be more vulnerable in situations like this, that they could be trafficked, they could be exploited in many different ways? What are you hearing from them? What are they telling you?
So after an incident of sexual gender-based violence, people generally start to isolate themselves because of the fear. So one of the most common issues reported is fear after the incident. So they avoid the places or things that remind them the incident. A lot of them develop depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and also they have difficulties on reintegration in the community because of this fear, and also they are very afraid of stigma.
Let's bring in Joel Ali into our discussion via our Zoom link. Ms. Ali, very good morning to you. Thanks very much for joining us. What is your perspective at the start of our discussion this morning?
Good morning, Fazir. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. From the IOM perspective, gender-based violence is really a protection risk. And as an humanitarian organization, one of our core functions is really to support states with providing the much needed protection for persons at risk, and migrants are some of those vulnerable persons at risk. Often, very times, we support the states in many different ways, but we also support the migrants directly. For instance, you will hear later from Gracie about her mental health and psychosocial support. But protection from gender-based violence is not just about, say, physical or sexual abuse. It's about the denial of resources and opportunities as well. And therefore, the work of IOM, we get involved in many different protection activities.
And in relation to that, I mean, apart from the specifics about, access to services, registration or re-registration, what about the attitude? Because there's always that situation where in a place where there are economic challenges, those who are coming in are perceived to be threats. that they are taking our jobs, they are coming here to get privileges that should be given to us first. How do you deal with that, Miss Ali? I don't know if you're confronted with that in any sort of dialogue, that people will say, why we must give all these outsiders this, that, and the other, when we here catching we tail?
Well, I mean, this is normal. It's not unique to Trinidad and Tobago, actually. How do we confront that is by providing mutual information. One of the core functions of IOM as part of the humanitarian response is to provide mutual information so that decisions and information, can be made based on data, not just based on feelings and, probably what you see. And that usually helps, because when people get to know the facts, and it's supported by actual data, it's general across the world that migration really benefits a country, a society. It benefits the economy, it benefits everyone culturally and all of that. So I think the key to it is getting correct information.
And Ms. Gonzalez Laguna, give me your perspective on that, because I'm sure you would have heard it. If people wouldn't have said it directly to your face, they might have said it indirectly or to somebody else, and that would come back to you that you would hear people say, all these Venezuelans come in here and getting all these privileges and so on. How do you respond to something like that?
Well, just trying to link that with sexual gender-based violence, we have to always approach those cases with 4 basic principles: safety, confidentiality, respect, and non-discrimination. And non-discrimination means that every human being have the right to receive the proper care and assistance in cases like this, regardless race, regardless language, regardless nationality.
I hear you on that, but we all know in the real world what happens in writing isn't necessarily what happens in real life. People, because you hear it and you see it all the time. There are many good people in Trinidad and Tobago who would like to provide for migrants, whether they be Venezuelans, whether they be from West Africa and so on. Yet you will also hear people who will say that, look, there are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who are in need of support or in need of services, and maybe they should be getting it, and that the migrants should not be getting all these services, even though it's a human right. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so my perspective is that migrants are not recipients of social services, that actually migrants can contribute culturally in the economy, and once we all understand that, it will be different in the way that we address the issues, in the ways that everything is programming, the interventions that are provided. Once the migrant person is integrated in the society, it will not be a burden for the country.
And before I go back to Ms. Ali, are you worried about the reports that we hear, or that you would have maybe interacted with victims themselves being exploited in Trinidad and Tobago, victims of sexual violence, sexual exploitation, because they may not be registered, they may not have come into the country legally, and therefore they could be exploited by different individuals? Is that a worrying situation for you?
Yes, it's a worrying situation. I must say that migrants, regardless their legal status, they could access to sexual gender-based violence care, but some of them don't know that, and some of them are just afraid. So it's not that they don't have access, but there's this fear that is very hard to remove from them. And also language barrier is a challenge, because even if they access to services, they can't communicate with the service providers.
And Ms. Ali, just give me your sense about a challenge like this, where people feel very intimidated. 5 years ago, they probably never thought that they would have been in a place like Trinidad and Tobago, where we don't speak Spanish quite regularly. They feel alienated. If something happens to them, they don't want to report it because they are scared. They might be deported. They might be victimized in some way. You talk about providing the facts and the information, but how much of that fact and information is almost overwhelmed by fear and the feeling of being persecuted in some way?
Thanks, Wazir. I just want to go back a bit about when you were discussing the impact of migration on a country such as Trinidad and Tobago. One of the key to actually benefiting from migration and mitigating some of the negative consequences of migration is actually managing migration. Therefore, there's critical need for a comprehensive migration policy. There's often the need to review existing migration laws. Last over a year and a half ago, IOM has worked with the Ministry of Labor, for instance, in developing the labor migration policy. Also, with reviewing different acts that have an implication on the welfare of migrant workers. So that's one of the key in terms of actually citizens actually seeing the benefit is when we manage it so that we could avoid the negative consequences and actually benefit from all the possibilities. In terms of how migrants feel, we as IOM continue to do a lot of data collection. And what we have found is that migrants definitely have expressed concerns about the level of xenophobia, about feeling discriminated against. Having documentation and being regularized is probably one of the main concerns, as well as being able to generate income. No migrant and no person in general really wants to depend on anyone for assistance. Ideally, people will want to live a life of dignity and respect, and this is across the board. And they would like opportunities to make it on their own, to work in a safe environment, and get all the other privileges that are needed for a decent life.
And Ms., getting back to Ms. Gonzalez Laguna, you've been in Trinidad and Tobago, what, 5 years now? Have you seen an improvement in the situation? Is it worse? Is it better as far as women, especially as migrants from Venezuela, getting opportunities to lead a productive life? Are they being targeted still? Are they being trafficked? Are they being exploited? Is it getting better or worse from what you understand?
I believe that after the registration process that gave them opportunities to women with the skills to be included in the labor market, which I see that as something positive because before they didn't have any opportunity. But it's a fact that probably there's other irregular migrants that don't have that opportunity.
And very sadly, we saw a situation last year where a Venezuelan national who had a relationship with a Trinidadian man was murdered. She was pregnant and she was killed and so on. Are you hearing about these things where Venezuelan women who get into relationships with people from Trinidad and Tobago are being abused or being exploited in any way? Do you get those?
Well, sex and gender-based violence is also rooted in inequality in terms of power in the relationship. So if you have lack of livelihood opportunities, food insecurity, that can put you in a vulnerable position of being involved in that dynamic in the relationship is not equal. So of course it can put you on risk of sexual gender-based violence by your intimate partner. Yes, definitely. And
are you seeing a change in attitude at all? Because I think when you look globally, you see many certain countries encouraging migration. For example, Germany, they welcomed in 1 million Syrians. It created some issues, yes, but they recognize that they need to have that productive employment situation in a declining economy. Do you see a change at all in attitude in Trinidad and Tobago where people are willing to recognize migrants, Venezuelan or otherwise, as productive individuals who could contribute to the economy, who could help the economy? Are you seeing that happening?
I believe so, because as I said, after the registration process, more Venezuelans have been able to be included in the labor market, use their professional skills, and yes, I believe we're still on the way.
And Ms. Ali, as you mentioned that thing about xenophobia, that fear of any and everything from outside. From your own perspective, is it about education? Is it about information? Is it about providing the actual data that would counteract a lot of the fear mongering and speculation? Would that be useful?
I think all of those are useful. It's really a complex issue, and you can't say that you would do one activity. You have to do several different things all at the same time. And IOM, for instance, will work with providing, say, more information to the migrants themselves whenever we go out into to do distributions of cleaning and hygiene kits. We would actually provide them with information in their own language about, how to access different services, regardless of what happens, counseling, if they have mental concerns, all of that. Yes, that's important. We also have to work with the general public. And one of the reasons IOM and the UN system as a whole, we have been trying to take our messages out of the offices in Port of Spain and really try to go out and do a lot more community engagement, inform persons about, what are basic human rights, why are these things all important, why is it important to protect all survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. It's about, even us going back to our international partners to provide them with key advocacy messages so that, all of us could be, making a contribution towards the change that we need. But it's definitely not like something that you could address just with one activity. You have to address at all different levels, and you need all your partners involved.
It is a continuous effort indeed. Joel Ali, the head of the IOM office, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this morning. But let me leave the final word here in studio with Ms. Gracie Gonzalez Laguna, or Gracie Carolina Gonzalez Laguna with the long name and so on. But what is your message to the people of Trinidad and Tobago who will still be expressing their concerns about these migrants and so on and so forth? What is your own feeling about this situation that you'd like to say to the people of Trinidad and Tobago?
I will suggest be open-minded and also be understanding. Try to get to know before making assumptions about someone, just how the person look or how the person speak, and just get to know the person. Try to listen to them. There's many ways to communicate with people, not necessarily with verbal language. And you will be surprised how probably your perception will change if you give yourself the opportunity.
And is that also a two-way street where Venezuelans need to understand as well that they also need to understand the Trini way of doing things, that sometimes the clash of cultures creates a problem? Is that something that maybe some Venezuelan nationals themselves are guilty of, that they don't fully understand how to communicate, as you said, non-verbally, and they should also learn to understand the culture that they're in?
Yes, definitely. It works both ways, yeah.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this morning as we talk about issues associated with gender-based violence, and indeed bringing in the issue of migration, which is very relevant to us here in Trinidad and Tobago. It's an ongoing situation. It's not going to change anytime soon, and indeed it's an opportunity for us to really improve the way we develop our human relationships with those right here in Trinidad and Tobago and those who are coming into the country as well. Well, as we go to the break, as we come around towards 7:53, approaching 7:54, here's Good Deed number 7. It's an image of a rufous-tailed jacama by Darren Henry. And now Good Deed number 8. It's a photo captured at Pigeon Point in Tobago. We'll be back right after this.